Before we begin, I want to invite you to do something important. If this message resonates with you, if you feel exhausted from trying to be enough for everyone, if you are tired of explaining yourself, proving your worth, or seeking approval, subscribe to this channel now. This audiobook is not entertainment. It is a reset. And the people who stay until the end are usually the ones who are ready to hear it. Now take a breath, slow down, and listen carefully, because what you are about to hear may quietly change the way you live your life. Part 1. The Invisible Prison. Most people don't realize they are trapped. Not because the prison is locked, but because it looks like normal life. From the outside, everything seems fine. You work, you socialize, you respond, you smile, you show up, you adapt, you perform. And that word, perform, is more important than it seems. Because many people are not living. They are performing versions of themselves that feel acceptable. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being yourself was risky. So you learned to adjust. You learned to read the room. You learned to soften your words. You learned to hide parts of yourself. You learned to explain your decisions so people wouldn't misunderstand you. You learned to impress. And slowly, without noticing, your life became a stage. Approval became currency. Validation became oxygen, and silence became uncomfortable. This book exists to remind you of something essential. You do not owe anyone a performance. Where this starts. It usually begins early. As children, we are praised when we behave in ways that please others. We are rewarded for compliance. We are corrected for authenticity. Over time, we internalize a dangerous equation. Approval equals safety. Disapproval equals danger. So we learn to manage perception. We become experts at anticipation. What will they think? How will this look? Will this disappoint them? And that constant calculation becomes exhausting. You may not even realize how tired you are, not physically, but mentally. Because when you live to impress, your mind never rests. The cost of impressing others. Trying to impress people costs you more than energy. It costs you clarity. It costs you boundaries. It costs you self-respect. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, every time you explain yourself when no explanation is required, every time you shrink your truth to keep the peace, you send a message to yourself. My needs come second. Over time, this message becomes identity. You stop trusting your own instincts. You start measuring your worth through reactions. You feel anxious when you are misunderstood. You feel guilty when you disappoint someone. And worst of all, you feel empty when approval fades. Because approval never stays. Why approval never satisfies. Approval is unstable by nature. It depends on mood expectations, context, power dynamics. Other people's unresolved issues. You can do everything right and still lose it. So when your self-worth is built on approval, your emotional state becomes fragile. You are calm when people agree with you. You are tense when they don't. You feel confident when you're praised. You feel small when you're ignored. That is not freedom. That is dependency. And dependency quietly erodes your sense of self. The moment you realize there is usually a moment. A moment when you feel drained for no clear reason. A moment when you ask yourself, why am I doing this? A moment when the effort outweighs the reward. You realize some people will never be satisfied. Some explanations are never enough. Some approval is conditional by design. And slowly, a new question emerges. What would happen if I stopped trying to impress? This question is the beginning of freedom. Why stopping feels scary? Stopping feels dangerous because it threatens an old survival strategy. Impressing others once protected you. It helped you belong. It helped you avoid conflict. It helped you feel accepted. Letting go of that strategy feels like stepping into the unknown. You may fear rejection, judgment, being misunderstood, being disliked. But here's the truth most people never hear. Being misunderstood is not fatal. Being disliked is not dangerous. Being authentic is not reckless. What is dangerous is abandoning yourself for approval that never lasts. The shift begins internally. You don't stop impressing others overnight. The shift is internal before it is visible. It begins when you pause before explaining. You notice when you're overperforming. You recognize when guilt is manipulation. You choose silence instead of justification. These moments feel small, but they are powerful. Because every time you choose self-respect over approval, your nervous system begins to recalibrate. You feel steadier, quieter, less reactive. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. A new definition of freedom. Freedom is not being liked by everyone. Freedom is being able to sit in silence without needing to prove who you are. Freedom is making choices without rehearsing explanations in your head. Freedom is knowing that your worth does not rise or fall with opinions. This book will teach you how to reach that state, calmly, gradually, without conflict. Not by fighting people, but by mastering yourself. End of Part 1. In Part 2, we will go deeper into why people-pleasing feels automatic, the psychology behind approval addiction, how guilt is used as a control mechanism, why silence is one of your strongest tools. If you've made it this far, write in the comments, "I choose self-respect." And don't forget to subscribe. If you've ever wondered why you automatically explain yourself, why silence feels uncomfortable, why disappointing someone creates anxiety in your body, this part will make it clear. Because people-pleasing is not a personality trait. It is a conditioned response. And once you understand where it comes from, it begins to lose its power. How the pattern is built. People-pleasing is learned, not through logic, not through choice, but through emotional repetition. At some point in your life, you learned that approval brought relief, disapproval brought tension, conflict felt unsafe, silence felt risky. So your nervous system adapted. It learned to anticipate reactions. It learned to soften your truth before it was rejected. It learned to over-explain before being questioned. This is not weakness. This is survival intelligence. But survival strategies are not meant to last forever. The role of the nervous system. When you try to impress others, your body is often in a mild state of threat. Your heart rate increases slightly. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your thoughts speed up. This is not imagination. It is biology. Your nervous system is scanning for danger. Will I be judged? Will I be rejected? Will this cause conflict? So you respond automatically. You justify. You apologize unnecessarily. You over-deliver. You explain your intentions. Not because you want to, but because your body wants safety. Understanding this is crucial. You are not broken. You are conditioned. Why explanations feel necessary. Many people believe explanations bring clarity, but most explanations are actually fear responses. You explain because you fear being misunderstood, you fear appearing selfish, you fear losing approval, you fear tension. But here's the uncomfortable truth. People who respect you don't need explanations. People who manipulate you demand them. The more you explain, the more power you give away. Because explanations invite judgment. The hidden contract of people-pleasing. When you live to impress, you enter an invisible contract. The contract says, "I will manage your emotions, and in return, you won't reject me." But this contract is never honored, because no one signs it consciously. You carry the responsibility. Others carry the benefit. And over time, resentment grows, not because people are cruel, but because you abandoned yourself. Why guilt works so well. Guilt is one of the most effective control tools. Not because people use it intentionally, but because you respond to it automatically. Guilt sounds like, "After everything I've done for you, I thought you cared. You've changed. I wouldn't do this to you." Guilt activates your fear of being seen as selfish, so you comply, even when it costs you peace, even when it crosses your boundaries. This is where self-respect begins to erode. The difference between kindness and self-erasure. Kindness is a choice. People-pleasing is a compulsion. Kindness feels calm. People-pleasing feels tense. Kindness has boundaries. People-pleasing ignores them. If your yes comes from fear, it is not kindness. It is self-betrayal. Why you feel anxious when you stop explaining. When you stop explaining, your nervous system panics. It feels unfamiliar, unprotected, exposed. Your mind says they'll think I'm rude. They'll misunderstand me. They'll be upset. But what you're really experiencing is withdrawal. You're withdrawing from approval dependency, and like any withdrawal, it feels uncomfortable at first. But discomfort is not danger. Silence as a signal of self-respect. Silence is not weakness. Silence communicates. Confidence boundaries, emotional regulation. Self-trust. People who are grounded do not rush to explain. They respond when necessary. They speak with intention. They allow others to have reactions. This is not coldness. This is maturity. The moment you stop performing. When you stop performing, some people will feel confused, some will feel uncomfortable, some will test your boundaries. This is normal. Not everyone benefits from your growth. And that is okay. Growth is not betrayal. Silence is not aggression. Self-respect is not selfishness. End of part 2. In part 3, we will explore why other people's opinions feel so powerful, how emotional control changes social dynamics, the moment you stop reacting, and what happens next, why inner silence makes you untouchable. If this part resonated, write in the comments. I no longer explain myself. When you're ready, just type. At some point, you begin to notice something subtle. People's opinions don't hit you the same way anymore. Their reactions feel distant, their judgments feel smaller. Not because you became indifferent, but because you became grounded. This is what happens when you stop reacting. Why reactions give others power. Every emotional reaction you give is information. It tells others what affects you, where you're sensitive, what can be used to control you. When someone sees you react quickly, defensively, emotionally, anxiously, they learn where your boundaries are weak. This is not always intentional manipulation. Often it's unconscious, but the effect is the same. The more you react, the more influence you give away. The illusion of defending yourself. Most people believe reactions are necessary to protect themselves. They think, if I don't respond, they'll think I agree. If I don't explain, they'll misunderstand me. If I don't react, I'll look weak. But reacting rarely protects you. It usually escalates the situation. It feeds the dynamic. It keeps you emotionally engaged. True strength is not loud. True strength is regulated. The power of the pause. Emotional control begins with one simple skill. The pause between what is said and how you respond. In that pause, you reclaim choice. Instead of reacting automatically, you ask, does this require a response? Is this worth my energy? Am I being invited into drama? Most of the time, the answer is no. Why silence makes people uncomfortable. Silence disrupts expectations. When someone expects a reaction and doesn't get one, they feel exposed, because now they must sit with their own behavior. Silence removes the mirror they were using to validate themselves. This is why silence is often labeled as cold, arrogant, passive-aggressive. But those labels are defenses. Silence forces accountability. When you stop reacting, dynamics change. Something interesting happens when you stop reacting. People begin to speak more carefully, project less, reveal more about themselves, because without your emotional response, their behavior stands alone. And many people are uncomfortable with that. This is not your responsibility to fix. Emotional control is not emotional suppression. Let's be clear. Emotional control does not mean ignoring feelings, pretending nothing hurts, becoming emotionally numb. It means feeling emotions without being controlled by them, observing before acting. Choosing response over impulse control is internal. Suppression is avoidance. They are not the same. Why calmness is misinterpreted. People often misread calmness as weakness. This is because many people associate strength with intensity. But intensity is often insecurity in disguise. Calmness communicates confidence, self-trust, emotional maturity. And emotional maturity intimidates those who rely on chaos. The moment you become untouchable. You become untouchable not when people like you, but when their reactions no longer define you. When criticism doesn't collapse you, silence doesn't scare you, disapproval doesn't control you, you stop outsourcing your worth. And that is freedom. Why not everything deserves a response? Responding to everything keeps you trapped. Every explanation drains energy. Every argument pulls you into unnecessary conflict. Wisdom is knowing when not to engage. Silence is not avoidance. It is selection. You choose where your attention goes. Inner authority versus external validation. When you stop impressing others, you begin to listen inward. You develop inner authority. Inner authority does not seek permission. It does not beg for understanding. It does not chase approval. It moves quietly, confidently, intentionally. The cost of being unbothered. Being unbothered has a price. Some people will feel threatened, feel disconnected, accuse you of changing. But the cost of staying the same is higher, because staying the same means continuing to abandon yourself. End of Part 3. In Part 4, we will explore how to build self-respect without isolation, why boundaries feel lonely at first, the quiet confidence that replaces validation, living without the need to be seen. If this part resonated, write in the comments, "I choose calm over reaction." When you're ready, just type. There is a phase that few people talk about. The moment when you stop explaining yourself, stop reacting, stop chasing approval, and suddenly, things feel quieter. Not peaceful at first, just quieter. Some conversations fade, some connections loosen, some people step back. And for a moment you may wonder, did I do something wrong? No, you did something different. Why boundaries create distance? Boundaries change dynamics. They remove access. They remove control. They remove familiarity. People who were used to your availability may feel uncomfortable when it disappears. Not because they hate you, but because the rules changed. And not everyone adapts. The loneliness is not failure. This phase can feel lonely, not because you are alone, but because you are no longer surrounded by noise. You are no longer constantly responding, constantly proving, constantly adjusting. And in that silence, old habits resurface. Doubt, guilt, the urge to go back. This is the moment most people retreat. But this moment is not a warning. It is a threshold. Why growth feels uncomfortable. Growth always disrupts equilibrium. Your old self fit into certain roles. Your new self doesn't. And systems resist change. Families resist change. Friendships resist change. Work environments resist change. Because change exposes patterns. Self-respect without isolation. Self-respect does not require isolation. It requires discernment. You don't cut people off emotionally. You adjust access. You don't become distant. You become intentional. You still care. But you no longer carry responsibility for others' emotions. The difference between connection and attachment. Connection is mutual. Attachment is dependent. Connection respects boundaries. Attachment resents them. When people leave because you set boundaries, they were attached, not connected. And that distinction matters. Why you feel guilty for choosing yourself. Guilt is a residue of old conditioning. You were taught that self-sacrifice equals love, availability equals value, saying no equals rejection. So when you choose yourself, guilt appears, not because you are wrong, but because you are unlearning. Guilt fades with repetition. The quiet confidence that emerges. As you hold your boundaries, something shifts. You begin to trust yourself. You stop overthinking responses, rehearsing explanations, monitoring reactions. You feel solid. This is quiet confidence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't argue. It stands. Why you no longer need to be seen. Needing to be seen comes from insecurity. When you trust yourself, visibility loses urgency. You stop needing recognition, applause, constant feedback. You still appreciate connection, but you don't depend on it. Inner peace requires emotional ownership. You begin to understand something crucial. You are responsible for your emotions. Others are responsible for theirs. This realization ends emotional entanglement. You stop absorbing moods. You stop carrying guilt that isn't yours. You stop explaining what doesn't need explanation. Why this stage feels empty. The space left by old patterns feels empty because it hasn't been filled yet. You removed approval-seeking, over-functioning emotional noise. Now there is room. This space is not loneliness. It is potential. End of Part 4. In Part 5, we will complete the journey, living fully without needing approval, trusting your internal compass, freedom as a daily practice, becoming emotionally sovereign. If this part resonated, write in the comments, "I choose self-respect." When you're ready, just type, "There comes a moment when something settles inside you." Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. You realize you no longer feel the urge to explain yourself. You no longer feel the tension of needing to be understood. You no longer scan rooms for approval. And it's not because the world changed, it's because you did. This is emotional sovereignty. What emotional sovereignty really means. Emotional sovereignty means you are no longer ruled by reactions. It means your mood is not controlled by opinions. Your worth is not negotiated through validation. Your peace is not dependent on agreement. You still feel emotions. But emotions no longer dictate your behavior. You observe them. You understand them. You choose how to act. That choice is power. The final break from approval. Approval once felt necessary because it replaced self-trust. Now, self-trust replaces approval. You begin to ask different questions. Does this align with me? Does this respect my values? Does this cost me my peace? And if the answer is no, you walk away, calmly, not angrily, not defensively, without explanation. Why you no longer need to convince anyone convincing is exhausting. It implies doubt. When you are aligned, there is nothing to convince. Your actions speak. Your silence speaks. Your boundaries speak. Those who understand will stay. Those who don't were never meant to. Freedom is not rebellion. Freedom is not rebellion against others. It is loyalty to yourself. You don't need to prove independence. You don't need to reject connection. You don't need to announce change. You simply live differently. The calm that replaces anxiety. When approval is no longer the goal, anxiety loses fuel. You stop anticipating reactions. You stop replaying conversations. You stop preparing defenses. Your mind becomes quieter, not empty, but clear. The quiet life is not a small life. Many people confuse quiet with insignificant, but the quiet life is intentional. It is built on self-respect, discernment, emotional clarity, inner stability. You stop living outward, you start living inward, and paradoxically, life expands. How you move through the world now. You speak less, but with meaning. You respond slower, but with clarity. You engage selectively, but deeply. You are no longer pulled into everything. You choose. Relationships after self-mastery. Your relationships change, not because you became distant, but because you became honest. You no longer overgive, over-explain, over-function. You meet people where they are, not where you hope they'll be. and this filters your life naturally. Peace as a daily practice. Peace is not a destination, it is a practice. Every day you choose not to react, not to prove, not to chase. Some days will be harder. Old patterns may whisper, but now you recognize them, and recognition is freedom. You are no longer performing. The performance ends here. No more managing perceptions, no more rehearsing identities, no more shrinking or exaggerating. You are enough without applause. The final realization. You don't need to impress anyone because the people who matter were never asking you to perform, and the ones who were asking you to abandon yourself. That is no longer your role. Conclusion. The quiet strength. This book was not about becoming cold. It was about becoming whole. Not distant, but grounded. Not detached, but sovereign. You don't need permission to be yourself. You don't need approval to exist. You don't need validation to live with integrity. You need clarity. You need boundaries. You need self-respect. And those grow in silence. Final message. If this audiobook resonated with you, let it stay with you. Not as motivation, but as a reminder. You are allowed to live quietly. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to stop impressing. And in that choice, you reclaim your life. End of book. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "I choose myself." And subscribe to Mental Core Audiobooks for more works on self-mastery, discipline, and inner freedom.